Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I'm very excited to have Terri Lomax with me here today. I met Terri on social media, I guess Facebook. You were announcing your upcoming book about your journey with fertility. And I was really excited to invite you to join me on the podcast to talk about your womb-centered healing journey around that, as this is often what brings many women to womb-centered healing is this process of learning and healing their fertility, learning about and healing our fertility. And it's one of the ways that we realize, oh my goodness, something's not quite right. My fertility isn't working quite right. It needs attention. And boom, this whole journey of this infinite realm of womb-centered healing opens up before us. And so I would love for you to introduce yourself a bit more and share about that journey for yourself, how it's unfolded.
Absolutely. Yes. So thank you so much for having me, Sam. I'm super excited to be here. And my name is Terri Lomax, everyone. I am a podcaster, speaker, and author. And basically, I do a lot of different work in tech and motivational speaking, but I would say that the core of my being is just dedicated to helping people become their best selves and just being a light in this interesting world we live in, I'll say. I'll just call it interesting to save the colorful language for later in the interview. But yeah, I just being a light in the world because the world is crazy, right? Oh my gosh. And so as far as this fertility journey, well, like you said, it was one of those journeys that I never really knew anything about. And I never thought that I'd have to learn about it until, of course, I had to learn about it, right? And so I found myself diving into this journey about last year. So my husband and I, we got married in 2015, and we wanted to wait to have children because I'm this ambitious career woman, so I wanted to achieve some goals. And I was 25 when I got married, so I figured I had some time. And so we had finally begun to start trying, and it was 2 years and we were still trying and nothing happened. And so at that point, we began to look at our options and started our journey toward, trying to have our baby. And so that consisted of various tests at the doctor's office, right, to check the sperm count, to check my eggs. And we did all that good stuff and found out that we have unexplained infertility. And so I'm still on the journey right now. It isn't resolved. We don't have our baby just yet, but it's definitely been an unexpected process with highs and lows. And I've learned so much about myself and my body over the course of this journey. So that's like the high level overview there. I'm sure you have some questions, Salma, so I'll just take a pause.
You're so wise. You could sense me going,
oh, yes.
So I'm curious to learn more about this unexplained fertility, which I'm sure is, for those of you who are interested or have personal experience with this, is an all too common response from the medical field, which means that the medical doctors haven't studied the various aspects, especially the female reproductive organs and how they function enough, or even looked into the process of menstruation and how that is a sign and signal about our fertility, and don't even inquire into that and haven't done research on it. And haven't, there's just so much that's left out and deliberately excluded about feminine health from the medical science, right? From the medical realm of study that they could say, oh, it's unexplained infertility. That's basically a fancy way of saying we don't know what's
exactly. Yes,
you're supposed to solely rely upon them, and they're the only ones that your insurance is going to cover in order to get you help with this situation. So I said a bunch of things in that question because I have a few things to say about this, as you might have noticed.
Yes.
And podcast listeners are probably used to that. It's a two-way conversation, not just a one-way interview. So I'm really curious how you felt about that. What was the information that they were able to give you, and what you've started to piece together in the puzzle? Have you started to explore outside of what the medical field has to offer you? You know, the zones and realms where they won't necessarily explore, that it leaves it up to you to go and explore, because there are plenty of health-oriented lineages that have studied and worked with feminine reproductive health and masculine reproductive health much more extensively for thousands and thousands of years, longer than the medical field, the modern medicine has even been in existence.
Mm-hmm.
It has a long-standing, well-trusted history of addressing these issues. And so I'm curious of what you've explored to fill in that blank that the medical doctors gave you of unexplained infertility.
Yes, that is a great question. And I will say this was totally new for me. I mean, being a young woman where everyone's like, oh, you have plenty of time. You know, I'm just turned 30 last November. And so folks are like, oh, don't worry about it. You still have time. My mom had 5 natural births. And I never knew that infertility was a thing because I didn't see it in my family. So I'll just say that first. Now, when we went to the doctors, I will say we went to a very great fertility clinic. They were very supportive, but I did notice that there was sort of this void, right? There was something missing. And I noticed that a few times in several of our appointments, more specifically after we went through a round of IUI. And
what's IUI?
oh goodness, I want to get the verbiage right here.
Intrauterine
Insemination.
Insemination.
Yes. So I want to say, from my understanding, it's under IVF, which is like the big one that we all hear about, in vitro, right? It's a lot more expensive, a lot more invasive. IUI is basically where they take the male's semen sample, they cleanse it, and they actually put it up in your uterus just to give you that extra push that you need when you ovulate so that the sperm meets the egg. And so we went through 2 rounds of that. The first was unsuccessful, and then the second we did get pregnant, but I had a miscarriage. And what I noticed was that at one point the doctor said that I had polycystic ovarian syndrome ovaries, meaning that I had several cysts on my ovaries, so maybe 30 on each ovary, which was a lot. And when I asked about how I could decrease that, I didn't really get an answer, like a clear answer on what to do. So of course I did my Googles, right? I went to my BFF Google, did some research, and I saw that a lot of folks were talking about healing themselves with their diet. And so I, as desperate as I am for this little baby, that I can feel the baby's energy. I'm like, I know my baby's here. I just want to bring my baby to this side of the universe, right? And so I decided to change up my diet, and I became a pescatarian, and I also took out dairy, and I was, working out, eating very well. And I noticed that the next time I went to my appointment, the doctor said that I had the cyst on my ovaries had decreased. So at this point, I probably had, it was around 18 in 12. And he did not say anything about the significance. He didn't mention it, but how you just have that gut feeling. You're like, I know what happened here. I believe with all my heart. I'm getting goosebumps now. I believe that it was my diet change and the internal work that I was doing on myself. And so that was one thing that stood out. Now, when I went through the miscarriage, basically it was the day after Mother's Day, the day before my husband's birthday, and we thought check the heartbeat of our baby. And that was the day where the doctor, he pulled up my ultrasound on the screen, and based on the YouTube videos that I had looked at, I had saw where a woman should be at 6 weeks and what it should look like, and mine did not look like that at all. And so I was kind of prepared internally, but as I examined the doctor's face, I could see that this isn't turning out very well. And so he did share with us at that appointment that we would most likely miscarry. The pregnancy isn't developing as it should be. And so what they were saying is that if my body does not pass the miscarriage naturally, they would recommend a D&C. And the D&C, I want to make sure I get the correct language for this. I believe that's dilation and, now this second word, I may butcher it, everyone, but curettage, I believe. Maybe some of it. The D&C is basically what I heard was like the abortion procedure, right, to expedite the miscarriage. And they were really pushing for this. And I did not want to have this intrusive procedure because there is a risk involved that it could, decrease my chances of getting pregnant in the future. It could cause scarring on my uterus. And so I went to my natural remedies. I was at acupuncture several times a week. I did Reiki, I did visualization and prayer, I did meditation, and I am excited to share that I passed the miscarriage naturally. And that was a huge accomplishment for me because what it showed me and proved to me was that I can control how my body responds to certain things if I do the work. So whether it's natural remedies and also using my spiritual practices, I do have the power to do that. And I had so much faith that it would happen. It was very painful, but I did pass it naturally. And that was a huge accomplishment for me.
Beautiful. Yes. So first of all, I want to acknowledge you for that faith in your own body wisdom and for listening to that voice inside of you that said no to that procedure, and for also listening to the voice inside of you that said, okay, but if we're not going to do that, we need to do something that's going to be effective, because that's one thing that I often see happen for people is that they get the feeling that, what the medical doctors are offering me isn't right for me, but then they don't go and get support elsewhere from practitioners that have training and skills and ways of supporting them that do feel good. And then they're left in this limbo land with problems that accrue, and then they just keep going back to the doctor who gives them unsatisfactory answers and saying no, and then it can be this, so I really want to acknowledge you for saying, okay, if I'm not going to do this, what am I going to do to support my body so that I can have the support that I need and be empowered. And so I'm just wanting to celebrate you.
Thank you.
And also acknowledge the loss of that initial pregnancy, because there's an emotional aspect to that. There's you wanted this pregnancy, you've been wanting this pregnancy for years, and here it was. And that, I could just tell by the way that you're describing that, and just what I know about women who want to get pregnant and have a challenge with it, is that there's this great anticipation, and then when you discover that something's not going well and then there is a miscarriage, it can be a great deal of feelings of loss and some grieving. And I'm curious how you've supported yourself with that grieving process.
I will say, last year was such an interesting year, and the universe has a way of, I don't even know how to explain it, but just, I guess, giving you what you need, even though sometimes you don't think you need it or you don't understand. And I say that because at the same time that I was pregnant, my best friend, so we've been friends for maybe 15 years at this point, she was also pregnant. So we were, downloading pregnancy apps together, and we were sharing updates. And so when I found out about the miscarriage, it was very tough, to see my best friend. She's had her baby now, but to see her continue her pregnancy, and I have to now, my pregnancy is basically terminated. So that was really rough. In addition to that, I lost my grandmother, who was like my mother figure in my life, a month after the baby, and she was waiting eagerly for this pregnancy. So there were so many layers to the loss. And so before I get into how I was able to cope and sort of handle that, I do want to talk about how we support women who are struggling, because I got well-intentioned but such horrible feedback and advice from some folks. I remember one woman said, "Oh, you were only 6 weeks. It must not have been that bad," or 8 weeks, or whatever I was. "It must not have been that traumatic." And I was like, no, but actually it was. And I think that validating someone's experience is so important. It doesn't matter if it's it doesn't matter what kind of pregnancy it is. I think ectopic, I forget the name. You may know some, but there's another pregnancy. I can't think of the name. It escapes me at the moment. But no matter what the loss is, I think just validating that loss for the other woman is so important. And just asking, how can I support you? Those little questions, I think that question goes a long way. And as far as the coping, I would say that community for me was so important. And community doesn't necessarily look like it has in years past for some folks, right? So for me, that community did not include many of my family members. You know, it included an online community of women I don't even know their names. There was a pregnancy app where I could ask questions anonymously, and the support in that group was so amazing to me because the people were positive. They knew what I was going through, and they just offered incredible advice. I was online on different forums. I reached out to various doulas and folks that were sort of in the natural, I want to say natural world, so to speak. And so that was really important for me. But also, we did a ritual for the baby that, didn't have an opportunity to come on this side of the world. And so that ritual was really important in sort of closing out that chapter and holding space for myself to heal. I am the kind of person oftentimes where if I experience something, I'm like, okay, let's figure out how to overcome. How can we help someone else with this? How can we turn this pain into purpose? And I'm like, go, go, go. And one of my coaches actually challenged me to just be still and to sit with all of the emotions, which is sometimes so uncomfortable because I don't
Mm.
like to cry. I don't want to ugly cry or, all that. So I don't want to do that. It's uncomfortable. But she told me that it's so important to hold space for yourself, to be still and to feel all the emotions. She also shared with me that it's important to realize that you can be genuinely happy for your best friend that's pregnant, and you can still very much want your baby at the very same time. We don't have to have these boxes that we're in where, oh, I feel guilty because, I want my baby, but my best friend's pregnant and I want to support her. I think having open dialogue with my best friend was also very helpful, and just being honest with myself about where I am in my journey.
Beautiful. I'm really curious about how that dialogue went with your friend. Uh, could you share little snippets of what you shared with her to hold both of those realities together with her?
Yes, so we've been friends for a long while, and so we have very open, raw, and authentic conversations. And so I remember when she actually got pregnant, she was a little nervous to text me, and she was just honest with me, and she let me know that she didn't know how much to share and, what was too much, and she didn't want to cut me out of the journey completely. So we just had an open conversation about feelings. And I think in that conversation, I remember just letting her know that I have these two feelings that are living simultaneously with me. And one is that I am so happy for you. I'm so excited. I know that she wanted a baby. I'm so excited for you. At this very same time, this other feeling takes nothing away from the joy that I have for you, but I desperately want my baby. And
Mm.
my best friend, her and her husband probably tried for like a month or two and they got pregnant. And then I'm on this journey where it's like it's taking all this time. And so I think just having the open conversation, and on days where I wasn't interested in getting updates, just letting her know that it's not you, it's just a rough day for me. So I just need a little bit of time, and I'll let you know when I'm ready to resume the baby app updates.
That just gives me such a sigh of relief for you that you're able to have a healthy boundary like that with your friend, and that she's able to honor that, or she was, and hopefully I'm imagining she will still be able to honor that for you, because I imagine as you continue on your fertility journey and this desire for your baby and any further challenges that you may have, you're going to still continue probably to have some up days and down days. Meanwhile, she's got her baby and all the exciting things that are happening for her, wanting to share them with a friend. I can imagine there's going to be more days when you're like, okay, not
Yeah. Yes.
right? Oh, wow. Thank you. I'm so glad for you with that. I really feel the blessing of that aspect of your friendship. And I just want to emphasize that for those who might find themselves in a similar situation, that we really need to give ourselves permission to to have boundaries that take care of us, and that not allowing ourselves to have that, feeling guilty for asking for that, or whatever reason we may have to think that we don't have the right to ask for those kinds of boundaries, can cause so much suffering that's really unnecessary. And to really trust in our friendships,
Mm-hmm.
And ask our friendships to improve, to
Yes.
honor our needs if they need to, um, because it's necessary to take care of ourselves and wherever we're at. So thank you for being such a lovely, wise example of how to navigate these tricky
Thank you.
waters.
Oh, yes. Tricky waters indeed. Thank you.
I'm curious what next steps look like for you. What do you feel called to explore in in your fertility journey? You say it's not resolved yet. I know you're working on your book. I'm imagining it's a work in progress. Um, with updates that you'll continue to add. And this fertility journey isn't going to follow a book writing plan.
Exactly.
Right? So
Exactly. That
I
is so
figured
true.
if you are allowing your book writing to follow the fertility journey, and when will you know when the book is done? Are you waiting till the baby actually comes to then be able to finish the book, or are you gonna finish the book and then maybe have a part two if the baby doesn't come within the time? That's my curiosity, is how
Yeah.
two projects, birthing the book and birthing the baby, are gonna
Yes.
interface.
That is a fantastic question. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because one thing I did do that I have since shifted from is I put a lot of stuff on hold because I'm just waiting for my baby. So I was
Mm,
like, oh, I don't want us to go on vacation because, it may not be the ideal time. So I just kept putting things off and putting things on hold. And so that's one thing I stopped doing because it was kind of stealing my joy, and it was stealing moments of delight that I could have had, that I was waiting and putting all on, the waiting for the baby. So we can still be joyful in the midst of the journey, right? We can be joyful in the meantime as we wait for what we really want. And so I actually finished the book around the time, or added more to the book around the miscarriage, because it was healing for me. And so after I gave myself time to get those heavy emotions out and just process them, I went into my normal state, which is, how can I help someone else with this, right? And so I added some content in my book about the miscarriage, because the book holistically is really about the adversity that I faced from a child, from being abused to having a parent that was incarcerated to, struggling with self-esteem and confidence, all of those things, to, elevating and reaching the goals that I've set for myself, even though the odds were there. So the book does cover a bit of the miscarriage, in addition to some of the other adverse obstacles that I faced. But the
mhm.
book will come out before the baby for sure. I'm going to plan to release it in March of 2020. That's the
Okay,
goal.
that is definitely, even if you got pregnant tomorrow,
Yes,
be before the baby was born.
exactly. Before the baby's born. And I already have ideas for a second book. So that book will probably include more of that journey. But I also did a podcast episode on my podcast with my co-host, and we talked about the nitty-gritty details of the fertility journey, societal expectation on, the expectations that society puts on women to be mothers, when some women just don't feel inclined to, have children. So we talked about that, and I kind of detailed the journey there. And for me, those were sort of my ways of healing, and also providing, I want to say, insight and inspiration for other women going through, and sort of making that pain purposeful, so to speak.
Mhm, mhm. And so, how do you feel about your fertility journey now? Do you feel there's more healing that you can do, physiologically, spiritually, emotionally, that will help to prepare your body and your womb for pregnancy? What does that look like for you?
I do, and I feel like this journey has actually been beautiful now that I'm kind of in a better place after the miscarriage, because I've learned so much about my body. I have also come to grips with the fact that there's a lot of childhood trauma that I have not had a chance to process. And I know that a lot of that is right in that root and sacral chakra, and I'm like doing my personal work to clear that space out, because I want to be the best vessel for my baby and the best mom that I can be. And I know that healing myself and adopting new habits and even getting rid of some of my toxicity is going to be important to be the best mother I can be. So at this point in the journey, I am working on being healthy. We are exploring some in-home IUI options, which is a lot cheaper than going to the fertility clinic. So we have researched several doulas, my husband and I, that are more on the natural path that do in-home IUIs, but they also do natural home births, which will be my ultimate goal. Of course, we know births can end up however they end up based on what needs to happen, but that is the ultimate goal. So right now I'm just being healthy, being patient, and still very much working on manifesting my little baby.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, back, if we rewind a little bit to what you mentioned a minute ago, which was the early trauma that you might be carrying in your womb and that you're working with that. That's a lot of what I'm motivated in my work and devoted to in my work, is helping women process and resolve that trauma that can constrict the flow of energy and life force and vitality in various areas of our bodies, very often in the womb space. And so I'm curious what healing modalities you're engaging with, and what kind of support you're receiving and setting up for yourself to process that as you continue on this journey.
For sure. Well, let me just say I am not a one-woman show. I have a team supporting me for sure. And so I would say that part of that sort of team includes my acupuncturist, which has been really helpful and really great. And so that's been good for me. Therapy as well has been great. I also tried Reiki, which was a really cool experience. And so I may continue to do that. And then I would say just my personal meditation practice. I've been doing a lot of meditation, and I've also been sort of revisiting the moments where I experienced trauma and taking myself back to that moment as an adult and saving myself. So going into a situation where I was being abused or I was like beat, and I go in and save myself before that happens, and just really holding space for that little Terri that just wants love and that just wants to be healed and held, and sort of working on parenting my younger self, so that I can truly be cleared of the energy and just really letting those emotions come up and processing them, because I didn't really have a lot of space to do that when I was younger. So I think that can also help. So I'm doing what feels like all the things to get to my ultimate goal here, but those are just some of those practices.
It's beautiful. I am very curious about how people approach resolving trauma, because it's only just recently that experts have begun to announce that research has shown that this or that type of therapy actually is effective in resolving and healing trauma, and this and that type of therapy has less effectiveness or is incompletely effective, right? It addresses one aspect of it, but not all aspects of it. And what was missing in a lot of like talk therapy or psychotherapy or like that was the somatic aspect. And there have been recently a lot more somatically focused, meaning body-centered. Where is the trauma residing in the body? How can we release the trauma from where it resides in the body, from the areas and the organs, the structures of the body that are being detrimentally affected by that trauma contraction, trauma reaction? How can we influence the whole nervous system to switch out of trauma response mode, perpetual trauma response mode, and reorient towards wellness mode and healing mode on a more consistent and regular basis? Because a lot of us that experienced early childhood trauma, we kind of got addicted to that trauma hormone cycle, right? The adrenal cortisol cycle in our nervous system that then becomes very damaging to our whole system. And the womb is very wise. If we're in chronic stress mode and panic mode in our nervous system, it doesn't want to have a baby. I mean, it's not going to hold pregnancy to term.
Exactly.
Some people manage to do it anyway, which is a mystery to me. But
Yeah.
many of us, especially more and more so when we have so many collective global issues with overpopulation and environmental challenges and, uncertainty of what our society is even going to be like in 10 years, if we're even going to be able to be alive on this planet in 10 years.
Yeah.
A lot more people's womb wisdom is saying maybe not, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so getting in touch with those sources of trauma, whether they be from early, which most of us have, early childhood, our development as children, that cycle of perpetual trauma response, right? Where, I don't know if you've had this experience, but that often what that looks like for me is that there'll be a current circumstance that vaguely reminds me of some early childhood trauma, and somehow suddenly I'm having this huge reaction to this small current circumstance. I talk about it as this big backpack of emotions, of unresolved feelings that I'm still carrying around with me, or people call it their baggage, right?
Yes.
That then turns this current circumstance with another person or whatever it is in our life into this big panicky emotional thing, and then we keep perpetuating that, right? And so as you're doing what you're talking about, which includes therapies like acupuncture, like Reiki, and I'm imagining you do some breathing in your meditation practices, to release and re-regulate that your nervous system to health and well-being and healing mode and rest mode. And then that remothering of sort of traveling back in time, if you will, to those times and rescuing yourself or giving yourself the nurturance and the wisdom that you didn't have back then that you now have, and giving that to yourself in retrospect. We can be the guardian angels for ourselves. Many people talk about how they felt like they got through a particularly traumatic time as a youngster because some guardian angel showed up, but guess who that was?
Yeah, that's, yes.
Yourself, isn't that true?
Wow. I never looked at it that way, but I've definitely had the guardian angel feeling. I'm like, there's no way I could have gotten through this.
Right. And so that guardian angel is often our future self, who we get to a place of safety, we get to a place of stability, and then we say, okay, now in order to move forward, I need to go back and address these things and nurture myself. And then we become that guardian angel for ourselves and guide ourselves through those rough spots. So I just want to celebrate you and your wisdom and knowing that you need all these aspects to your healing process. And I'm sure your second book is going to include so much richness to build upon what you've already shared in your first book. I'm really delighted to be sharing about your book writing process on the
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I'm curious if there's anything else about this journey that you would like to share, particularly anything that you feel has been sort of a pivotal or central gem or treasure that has come through for you, perhaps more than one occasion, some wisdom that you feel is like the ripe fruit from all of these experiences that you feel compelled or desirous to share with more people who might be still struggling with some of the things that you've been sharing about.
Yes, a few words and like phrases just come to mind for me. And I think I want to reiterate the importance of holding space for yourself and giving yourself time to feel all the emotions. I think we live in such a fast-paced world that has us on go, 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 or we're so distracted by the phone and social media and the TV. But I think just really being intentional about that time that you spend alone is so important, and really letting those emotions come up. And so finding a quiet space at home, I usually go into my closet at home, and that's my little sanctuary. And that's where I can just cry and turn on music. I have a little sign on the door. It's a meditation sign I got from Amazon. And so one side says, welcome, come on in. The other says meditation in progress. So my husband knows, like, don't mess with her. She's meditating or she has time for herself. So that is super helpful. I'd also say protect your energy. Be mindful of who you let into the journey. I typically share a lot of my life and personal struggles on social media. So my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. But during this actual journey, I didn't share a lot of that. And that's because I really didn't want to have advice or well-intentioned but damaging words sort of directed toward me. So I think just being intentional about who you let into the journey, because you don't want folks that are going to be discouraging you in the midst of this very difficult time. And the last thing would just be gentle with yourself. Sometimes we're so hard on ourselves. I would say just be gentle. Be gentle with yourself. It's not your fault. It's just a part of the journey that we have to figure out what's next, right? And a couple questions that I constantly ask myself, even in the midst of this journey, because I'm still going through it, right? The first question is, okay, guides, God, the universe, whoever your higher power is, or if you want to speak to all the higher powers, just asking, okay, what am I supposed to be learning from this situation? Right now I'm in it. I'm not pregnant. I'm struggling with infertility. I'm here. So I might as well, try to find a lesson or something from the situation. So my question is typically, what am I here to learn? And, who can I help? Mm-hmm.
So I'm just taking a deep breath and receiving this hard-won wisdom that you are so generous to share with us. Thank you so much, Terri. I definitely receive your words into my being and into my life as they touch areas for me personally in my growth and my challenges. Um, very, very tenderly and sweetly. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I invite listeners to take a deep breath and receive the wisdom of the womb that is shared here today. And so if someone wanted to reach out to you and learn about how to get a hold of your upcoming books and anything else that you might have to offer, how might they do so?
Yes, the best way to get in touch with me The best way to get in touch with me is my website, which is terrilomax.com, and that's TerriLomax.com. That'll give you access to my podcast, a direct link to my blog, my online coaching programs for branding and blogging, everything you need, speaking opportunities, all that good stuff can be found at terrilomax.com.
Wonderful. All right. And as you may know, if you've been listening to the Womb-Centered Healing podcast, in order to find out more about the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, you can go to wombcenteredhealing.com. And so thank you so much, Terri, once again. That's all for now. Until next time.